methodology, right? Result and discussion, or sometimes it's called findings and discussion, conclusion, and recommendations for further studies. And sometimes if you are in the field of English language teaching or TESOL or TEFL, you should also have pedagogical implications as well, right? So, these are the basic components that a good research papers should contain. Okay, I'm going to start with abstract, right?
Recording in progress.
Okay, sorry, I'm not so sure what's happening here, but okay. So according to Highland, actually, there are many models that you can follow, right? But one of the most famous is by Highland 2004. It's known as 5-move model, containing introduction, purpose, method, product, and conclusion. So in the abstract, if you want to write a very effective abstract, right, you should have introduction that establishes the context of the paper and motivates the research or discussion, or tell the readers why you want to do this topic, right? And purpose, right? Yeah, what's the purpose of your research, right? You can outline intention behind the paper. And this is very important, the third one, right? You should provide information on design, research design, procedures, assumptions, approach, data, participants, and then you state the main findings and result or arguments in product. And finally, you in your conclusion, you interpret the result. This is similar to what you discussed, right? The findings, and extend the result beyond the scope of the paper. And you can also indicate implications. Everything must be written in a very brief manner, right? Because, usually when you write an abstract, you have about 150 or 200, right, words to cover, right? So make sure that your abstract is strong enough, okay? I give you some example. Okay, one example from Indonesian Journal of Applied Linguistics. This is a very recent one, right? About flipped learning. I know that some of you who are in the field of language teaching should have come across the term flipped learning, right? So you can see that you don't have to understand what it is, right? But you can see the different parts that are highlighted in different colors here, right? The first one, this is like introductory sentences, right, of what flipped learning is. This is to familiarize your readers with the topic of your research, assuming that not all of them know what you are doing, right? And they look at the second part. This is purpose or objective, right? This paper aimed to explore student achievement and perception in an online flipped grammar class. So, we know that, okay, the researcher looked at flipped, grammar class, right? So, what they are looking at is grammar in the flipped classroom, right? And then the green one shows the methodology, right? And the statistics being applied. For example, a pair sample t-test show a significant difference, right? Not only should you mention what statistics you employ, but you should also, because of the time space limit, right? You need to tell the readers what the results are. Okay, here you should also include all the instruments being used, like interview, questionnaire, what are the main findings that you have discovered, right? And then you can also discuss. So you can see that the rest of the abstract is dedicated to discussion of the findings, right, in a brief way. Right. And, I think in the final sentence, right, nevertheless, student recommended that. So this is like recommendation from your study based on student perceptions. Okay. I showed you another example from TESOL Quarterly, right? The paper entitled Classroom Interaction in CLIL Programs, right? Right now, CLIL is a very interesting topic that, many ESP and EAP researchers are interested in. Right. So here, you cannot assume that your readers are aware of what the definition of CLIL is. That's why you should provide them with some general background, right? So that's why, it's advisable that writers start from something that's general to something that's specific, right? Content and language integrated learning, or CLIL, emerged as a European endeavor to enhance foreign language proficiency and multilingual, multicultural citizenship among Europeans. So now you are in the introduction part. And please bear in mind that the introduction doesn't have to be very long, right? It is going to be like, some small paragraphs, right? That introduce your readers to the topic of your research, right? And then you can move to something that is specific, right? You can talk about evolution of CLIL here. And, it's very important to cite related studies or big names in the field. This is to increase the reliability and trustworthiness of your work, right? And you can talk about here emergence of a few critical voices. Some criticisms relate to methodological issues in the research studies carried out, right? And then you can also shift the focus from something general, right, to something specific to the context of your study. So here, you are talking about CLIL programs that are going to be applied to something to the specific context of your study, right? Okay. Okay, another one. Another tips you should clearly state purposes and research questions. Okay. This is from the paper called Lexical Richness in Research Articles, Corpus-Based Comparative Study Among Advanced Chinese Learners of English Native, beginner students, and experts, right? I think it was published last year. Okay, you can see that you can state the purposes or research question clearly like this, like what you did in your research report or in your PhD dissertation. The research question can be stated like, can be numbered, like number 1, number 2. Sometimes, right, if you have only one research question, it can be integrated into your paragraph, right? But if you have two, right, maybe, it's clearer to state them, right, separately like this. Okay. You should also state your research questions or your objectives or your hypotheses that follow literature review, right? So this is a tip, right? This is a tip. The way you write your research article would be slightly different from the way you write research report or PhD dissertation, right? Because in the dissertation, you are supposed to put research question in chapter 1, right? And then literature review would take up chapter 2, right? But it is a tip, or it's actually a strategy, right, for researchers, or you can say frequent writers, to state research question after literature review, right? Especially, in a high impact journal, right? High impact journals, usually, they don't give writers a lot of space to write down everything. So, this is my tip, right? You write a short introduction, and then you review relevant literature, relevant concepts, relevant previous studies. And then after that, you mention the research gap that your present study is aimed at bridging, right? And after that, you can present your research questions, right? So here, if you take a look at many, high quality journals like TESOL Quarterly, Language Learning, Modern Language Journal, right? So the writers, right, often present the research questions after all the literature has been reviewed like this. Okay. So you can, these are the tips that are based on my own observation from as an editor of Learn Journal, right? Learn Journal is a Scopus-based journal published by Language Institute, Thammasat University. I'm going to give you more details later on after the break, right? So review only related concepts, right? Don't review everything, right? When you write your doctoral dissertation or when you write your full report, it can be as thick as you prefer. It can contain anything that you would like to include, right? But for a research paper to get published in a journal, right, you are supposed to keep only related concepts that are going to be necessary for your discussion, right? For the discussion of the findings, right? And review only past studies, right? So bear in mind that there must be the studies that are necessary and are going to be cited in the discussion of the findings. Otherwise, you can consider not taking them in the literature review, and provide critical reviews on the theory. Don't just review them and put them in the chronological order, right? That's like the way our MA students often do, right? So you can put the theories or the scholars' viewpoints that are similar together, right? I would say synthesize what you have read and try to categorize the ideas, right, that are similar. Maybe you can group them. For example, if you are looking at listening, for example, maybe there are 2 or 3 opposing viewpoints or theories. So you can review them, right, and try to support each viewpoint using different studies, right? Studies. Okay, and the term literature review, you can this is what I have observed for some journals, right? Sometimes the term literature review is avoided, right? So you can see that from introduction. Even the term introduction is sometimes replaced by rationale or background of the study, and as I said, it must be written in a very short way, and then literature review is introduced. But sometimes literature review, the term is avoided. So you can start the literature review using some term, right? The concepts. For example, if you are working on vocabulary size, right? You can start it with vocabulary size. If you are working on collocation, you can start it with collocation or whatever, right? By not using the word literature review. Okay. Another example of the paper published in TESOL Quarterly, this concerns specialized vocabulary. Okay. And this study is based on a medical corpora. Okay. So you can see that. See here the way to write literature review. There are 2 views toward defining specialized vocabulary. And then you have to cite big names like Dilin Liu, Paul Nation, who are big names in the field, right? This is to help support your own critical viewpoint. And there are 2 views, the narrow view and the broad view. See? So this is what you are supposed to do whenever you conduct your research and whenever you do literature review, right? You have to read a lot, right? I would say, read until you are sure that you cover a sufficient number of studies in the field, and you cover all the related concepts and definitions, right? And then you are going to come across something that are like opposing viewpoint or maybe, classification. So, here the writer wants to make sure that there are 2 types of views, right? Narrow one and broad one. How are they different, and which one you are going to conform to, which one you are going to follow, right? Okay. I don't know what's happening to me, right? I mean, why there is a red line like this. So please forgive me. ครับ
อาจารย์สุปกรณ์
ครับผม
sorry to interrupt, but there is a line on the screen. There is a line.
Yeah, I know. I don't know how to get rid of it, right? Yeah, so please forgive me because if I have to eliminate it, maybe it will take me time. I don't know. It's like a technical problem. So please forgive me for this. Thank you, Ajahn Ken.
We can solve it after the break, Ajahn. Yes.
Maybe, right. Okay, thank you. Right. Okay. I hope it doesn't bother you much. Right. So you can point out some concerns, some academic concerns, right? For example, right, after you have reviewed the literature related, right, you can also state that, okay, here, even though the theory says this and that, there are still main concerns. The main concerns here are similar to limitation of the previous studies, right? This is what you have to point out, right? And there are many strategies, right? Some of the writers can point it out like this. Okay, like bullet them, right? This is not a very common one, not a very common way, right? Not very often have I seen this, but it is a paper published in TESOL Quarterly. But most of the time, the main concerns or the limitations of the previous studies are outlined in paragraphs, in text. Okay, and then you have to state the research gap. This is very important. After you have reviewed the literature, right, you are expected to state what are the questions that you are trying to answer, right? What are the research questions? How many of them? What are they? And you have to cite enough previous studies to confirm the existing gap, right? So, to let the readers know that you did quite a good literature review, right? You have to cite a lot, and then not only in terms of considerable amount of the reviewed literature, but you are also supposed to cite the distinguished scholars in the field, because this is expected and this is what reviewers are looking for, right? Okay, I show you how a research gap is stated. This is by Ajahn Jirada and her PhD student, published in Learn Journal in 2007, right? This is a good study, right? So this paragraph is very effective, right? So you can see that as seen, the foci mean focuses, right, of the aforementioned studies were the relationship between vocabulary size and reading comprehension, relationship between blah, blah, blah. So, this is to show that your literature review is thorough enough, right? And then you also mentioned that none was, or maybe you can use hedging, right? None or little or no, few or no studies, something like that, was concentrated on relationship between vocabulary size and years of study. Thus, okay, so here, this is the concluding sentence for mentioning the gap, right? Investigating vocabulary size and relationship for 2 years of study is essential and can fill in a researching vocabulary gap, right? So the last sentence is written down to show how this present study is going to close the gap. Another study by Ajahn Chatraporn from Kuli again, right, published with us, right? In her study, actually, Ajahn Chatraporn and her student, right? Assessing fluency is a crucial step for smart and sensible fluency instruction, right? However, oral reading has rarely been tested. See, so you are showing the readers that even though assessing fluency is, the focus of many previous studies, oral reading has been done, seldom done, right, in the past, especially in classroom in Thailand, right? And then you can state the reason. The research regarding the assessment of oral reading fluency in L2 context remains very, very little, right? And you can cite people who are in the field like William Grabe, right? Such research has never been conducted in the Thai context. So this is very important, right? You try to make it more convincing why your study is important, why your study is necessary, right? Even though it has been done elsewhere, yeah, right. Not many studies have been conducted in Thailand, right? So you want to bridge the gap. The current study compare various measures used to assess oral reading fluency skills, right? And the author also examines student attitude, blah, 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 right? So, in order to show that you did a thorough review of literature, you have to try to link the literature being reviewed with the research gap that you try to bridge in your study. Okay, now we are moving on to methodology. This is very important, right? What to include in research methodology concerns number one, participants, right? So here, when we talk about participant, maybe you can talk about sample. Who is your sample? Or actually, you can start with population. Who is the expected entire population? Who were your sample? Okay, what was the sampling method that you use to recruit the participants, right? How many? This is very important, right? Maybe what what their L1 is, right? Do they speak L1 Thai, L1 Mandarin Chinese, or whatever? Age, gender. If age and gender are significant variables in your study, if not, you may leave them unmentioned, right? You can talk about school context, L2 proficiency level. For example, if you are going to assess learners' development of something, from your experiment, you have to talk about their initial L2 proficiency level before they were recruited as participant of your experimental study, something like that. And what is also important is research instruments, right? What are the instruments that are used in your study? There can be many different instruments, right? It depends on the fields of your study. You can use tests like pre and post test, questionnaire, interviews, whatsoever, right? Whatever instruments you use, right, in the paper, you need to mention that they have been validated, right? They have been pilot tested, right? IOC or whatsoever, right? And it's advisable that good researchers rely on more than one research instrument for triangulation. You know what triangulation is, right? Triangulation of research instrument is very important, right? Because for example, if you submit your papers to any good journals likeภาษา, Learn, Reflections, to mention the journals published in Thailand, indexed in Scopus, right? The reviewers of these editors are looking for triangulation of research instruments. So maybe if you use interview only for your study, maybe that's not enough, right? You are supposed to rely on the data from at least 2, or it would even be better if you use 3 research instruments for data collection, right? This will increase the validity of your research findings, something like that. So this is very important, right? Some writers fail to get published in Learn Journal just because they use only interview in their study, or maybe actually they use different kinds of instrument, right? But what they submitted to our journal is just only the interview findings, right? Which is not adequate, right? Something like that. So maybe your study may consist of different phases, and you want to get different phases published in different journals, right? Sometimes it's okay, but sometimes it could be considered risky or dangerous, because when you divide your research study into different papers to get published, sometimes triangulation would be affected, right? And it means the readers or the reviewers, right, who are more important than the readers. The reviewers might object to publishing your manuscript because they cannot see triangulation, despite the fact that there is triangulation in your study. So that's what you need to take into your consideration. And you have to state what research design you are using. Is it survey, experiment, case study, or whatsoever? Material preparation, number 4 and number 2 go together, right? Pilot study, you should have some pilot study. IOC, test validation, and then framework for data analysis. What are the framework that you are following, right? Have you followed any? Because usually when we talk about framework, right, you can adopt the previous studies framework, right? Or maybe you can adapt, or you can make a combination. You can combine, the leading professors' frameworks that are relevant to the present study. Maybe you have found that Professor A framework is good in some respects, right? Professor B framework is also very nice, but in another respect. So you want to merge them, combine them, so that they fit. The new framework fits the current context of your study, right? Okay, this is from my own study, MA study, Punya Pavuntam. She's now teaching at Nakhon Sawan, Rajapat Nakhon Sawan, right? So in her study, right, It was published in 3L journal, right? By UKM University Kebangsaan, Malaysia. Another Q1 Scopus journal, right? You can try submitting your manuscript to this journal, right? It's very time consuming, right? Punjapai and I waited for more than 14 months to get this manuscript published, right? So here you can focus on the blue parts, right? You need to mention what who participants were in the study. The participants were grade 4 EFL students in an intensive English program at a private school in Thailand. So you are, this is very important. You know, as researchers, right, we should not mention the school name right now, right? In the past, this was widely done, but you know, right now, to observe the research ethics, you should not mention the school name, the university name, even though you are a member of the university, right? Doing so may violate the research ethics, right? You have to mention how many students got involved in your study, okay? Who they are, right? Okay, and why? Why you need, because you know in her study, in Punyapa study, right? This is her MS thesis, right? She collected the data from grade 4 student, grade 4 or C, right? Grade 4 EFL students, you know, whose proficiency level is very low, right? Okay. Maybe you have to cite someone to back you up, right? Why your decision was like that. 50 students got involved. Their L1 background was Thai. Their mean age was 10, something like that. Okay. And then you have to define or you know, spell out the research design. So here it was a one group pre-test, post-test, you know, so she had only one group of students. She administered the pre-test. And after her experiment, right, she used the same pre-test as the post-test to measure the students' gained knowledge, right, of preposition. Okay, we talk about that later on. And, you know, she used Cambridge English Present Test. I think this one is free of charge. It's downloadable, online downloadable, right? So, you know, you can use some tests like this, right? It depends, right? Maybe, you know, if you are working for your university, you have your own in-house tests that are equated with standardized tests, right? You can use any kind of standardized test to place the students, right? So here, in order to be sure that the participants are of the same, more or less the same English proficiency level from the beginning, right? She used this particular test, right, to screen the students. And finally, she got only 30 learners, ranked as A2 level learners, right? So, you know, she also used referred to CEFR. So I know you should be aware of this, right? There are 6 major levels of CFR, starting from A1 to C2, right? Yeah, some of my students, they got, they took a test at the company and they say, oh, Ajahn, I got A1, I got A2, because, and you know, they were very proud because they they had a misconception that A1 and A2 are the highest, right? But actually they are the lowest, right? Something like that. So you have to mention something like this, right? Give the sufficient context of your participants. And then you can also mention the statistics that you use, right, in your study. How did you analyze the quantitative data? What did you do qualitative data? So in this case, she used SPSS, right? She used whatever correlation, coefficient, whatever, and she used content analysis to analyze her interview data, right? Okay. Next, the results, right? Usually when the way, this is from my own experience as an editor, the way you present the results, this is not something not to worry much about, because, you know, different researchers can present result in their own way. And I don't see this as problematic. Yeah, most of them use tables, right? Some use figures, some use chart. And then, you know, from the table you describe, right? The result don't seem to come as a problem, right? So, you know, you can present, as the space allows, right? You can present the findings from your based on the analyzed data, right? They can be in table like this. Make sure that you conform to the format or the style sheet template of the journal that you want to publish with, right? But you know what is more? What is more important, but it goes together with result is discussion, right? You have to highlight the new findings. You know, this is a classic problem, right? That new researchers or graduate students are often faced with, right? Maybe, you know, they present the results and they don't know that they miss discussion, right? Some students of mine who are very new in the field, right? They just present the result and they write, you know, they present the result in tables or in charts whatsoever, and they write down, they describe their data, they say how many got this, blah, 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 who outperform who, right? But, you know, that's just reporting the result, not discussion. Discussion would be something that is, you know, a daunting challenge for novice researchers or authors, right? So here, you know, this is very important. You have to highlight new findings. What have you found in your studies, right? Okay, so in Punyapa's study, she investigated the use of preposition, the acquisition of preposition through data-driven learning, right? Oh, but sorry, this is from another study published in EAP journal, right? Among the few attempts to investigate erroneous uses of preposition embedded in lexical bundles in L2 production, blah, 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 right? And then the study, okay, pay attention to the highlighted part. This study targeted PP-based bundles, yeah, prepositional phrase, right? This is the focus of the study, identified in L2 argumentative essays. So you can see the context of the study. The focus was on argumentative essays written by L2 students, right? And the focus or the scope of the study was on only PP-based bundles rather than any other kinds of lexical bundles. And the findings provide new insights into learners' use of preposition in recurrent multi-word sequences. So, you know, it's found that students tend to use the same multi-word or multi-sequences repeatedly, right? So this is something that it's like, you know, a new piece of jigsaw that you want to put into the overall picture of this study in this field, right? There are many corpus-based researchers who are doing research on lexical bundles. And, you know, this particular study is aimed at bridging the gap on preposition, right? Okay, and try to link the findings of your study to the previous one. So I would say this is a must, right? After you have highlighted your results, right? What you should do next is to make a connection between the present study with the past studies that you have reviewed, right? So make sure that when you discuss the findings, right, the studies that you mention, right, for comparison with the findings of your study, right, should be mentioned earlier in the literature review. Right? I don't say chapter 2, but here, you know, I would say the literature review that you have presented earlier, right? Otherwise, it's going to be something like post hoc analysis, right? So this is very important, right? And as I said, don't put everything, right? You know, one thing that can vex reviewers and editorial team is to include too many references, right? For example, Learn Journal, we have come up with a new policy, right? We are limiting the number of references to 30, right? Because, you know, it's very difficult and it's very time consuming for the editorial team to deal with, you know, the papers and, you know, the references, right? That's why, you know, we want to restrict the number of words, right? The number of words allowed to be published in Learn Journal would be just only 7,000 words, right? Including figures, tables, right? Not references. Okay, so make sure that, you know, whatever journals you submit your manuscripts to, right? Don't exceed the word numbers นะครับ okay so here you can see that from the red parts this observation is consistent with accumulated findings in the literature, including other studies involving L2, L1 Korean EFL speakers, something like that, right? Try to make connection between your findings and the previous studies, right? I would recommend that you use hedging, right? Use hedges, right, in discussion, right? There are different kinds of hedging, right? You can use modals like could, may. You can use adverbs like probably, right? Or some phrase like it is probable that anything, right? To tone down your claim for, so that you won't be attacked by other people who disagree with you, right? So you can use something like approximately or very often or can partly explain something like that, right? This is to safeguard yourself from criticisms, right? Okay. This is another problem of novice writers, right? Sometimes, they don't want to make such a strong claim, but, just using present simple can be a risk. It could even lead to this rejection, right? Or maybe reviewers rejection or very low score in evaluation, right? Because it's like the writers are very proud or are so proud of their findings, despite the fact that actually you don't feel like that, right? That's not your real intention, but maybe you forget or you fail to use hedging, right? Conclusion, right? This is my observation. Sorry, it's in Thai, right? Conclusion should include the following. Number one, summary of the findings. When you summarize the finding, don't make it too long, right? Don't make it too long because it can be, boring, right? And, you should state pedagogical implications. So it depends. It depends on the policy of the journal. Some journals that are, based on language teaching, maybe they would prefer this part as a separate section, right? Maybe after or before conclusion, right? But for some applied linguistics journals, right, it's okay, it's acceptable to include pedagogical implications in conclusion. You don't have to have the section entitled pedagogical implications, but the readers know when they read conclusion. And as such, the conclusion would be a bit long, right? Okay, longer than usual, right? You should also include limitations and recommendations for further study. So, from what I have seen, all of these four components can be put together in conclusion. Or maybe in the conclusion, you have only summary of the findings and you can put limitations and recommendations for further study together, right? Make sure that you don't have to mention all limitations of the study. Mention only a few major limitations, and make sure that you address all the limitations in recommendation. For example, if the limitations of your study is the number of your students, for example, you collected the data from only 40 students, the low number of students is one big limitation of your study. So, in response to this limitation, you should also mention that in further studies, it's recommended that more number, right, higher number of participants be included, something like that, right? So whatever limitations you have, the corresponding recommendations for further study should be supplied. Okay. Okay, so here, pedagogical implications. This is very important. If, as I said earlier, right, if you are in the field of English language teaching, TEFL, TESOL, whatsoever, right, pedagogical implications, this part is very important, right, and you should not miss it, right, because if you miss it, right, the reviewers might ask you to add anyway, or maybe they are going to reject your paper, right? So this is an example, right? These findings provide useful pedagogical implications. This is from the last paper that I exemplify. They need, okay, They indicate the need for carefully designed preposition teaching. Okay, this is about preposition, right? After the corpus-based study demonstrated the lexical bundles that are preposition-based, okay? And some of them are wrongly used by L2 learners, but they occur with high frequency and they are recurrent. That's why, teachers should teach them how to use this preposition correctly, something like that, right? So, when you write pedagogical implication, right, it's important to keep in mind that the pedagogical implication must be based on the findings of your study, right? You cannot just recommend how to teach preposition or whatever, right? Based on your own imagination or based on your own viewpoint only, right? Everything must be linked to your own current study, right? This is from what I have seen. Some writers who got a problem, right? They got their paper got rejected just because the way they write pedagogical implication is not at all linked to the findings of their study. They just write it like general recommendation, general suggestion, and the reviewers asked them to rewrite it, but they did not. That's why the paper got rejected. So it's a pity, right? It's a pity. Okay, recommendations and limitations and recommendations. Here you can say the current study data comprise essays written in response to only 3 writing topics, right? Limiting the study's generalizability for academic writing. So in this respect, further research is needed, blah, 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 right? Comparative studies that use native and non-native corpora should be the focus of future studies, something like that, right? So limitation doesn't mean weakness, right? Limitations mean, all studies in the world have limitation. Limitation is not equal to weakness, right? Limitations mean what researchers are well aware of that study, right? It is the area that the present study cannot reach. Yeah, maybe due to the time constraint or maybe due to, some reason, right? But, they have to be officially admitted, in limitations of the study, right? Okay. And then you have to, maybe you can say that, okay, this study is a small scale one. That's why, the number of essays are limited to only 3. So in future studies that have more time, more budget, maybe, more types of essay or more different topics can be included. Okay, something of the kind, right? You can have concluding paragraph. Make sure that the concluding paragraph is your punchline. This is something that you hit the readers, right? Because, the way you introduce your paper and the way you conclude the paper seem to be very, very important. So here, the writer, right, overall, right, you can use something like this: overall, or in conclusion, right, the present study adds useful insight into the use of lexical bundles produced by English learners, pinpointing specific areas. So you can see that this is not just general summary, right? The writer does not just sum up the main findings, right? Because it has been earlier summarized, right? But here, this is like the final thoughts, the final remarks that the writers want to communicate with the readers. The findings of the study thus offer practical pedagogical information that should be useful for ESL, EFL teachers, right? While potentially providing basis for future research to delve more deeply into the usage of formulaic sequences. So here, see, when you write the concluding paragraph, this can be something that you just want to communicate with the readers. And this can be something from your own mind, something that is related to your study. But this is not the summary of the finding. That's why, summary and conclusion are not the same. Summary can be part of conclusion, but actually conclusion is necessary, right? Conclusion means, apart from summing up the previous studies, right? The final paragraph or conclusion should be something that is like the overall picture that you want to talk to your readers, right? This is like from your own mind, from your own heart, and this is like it's like, you know, what you are going to close your paper with, right? Okay, right. I think before we move on,นะครับ, I would like to welcome some questions from the floor before we move on to another. I mean to the other topic, นะครับ. Are there any questions regarding writing manuscript? Maybe, you know, because of the time constraint, I cannot touch upon everything, right? But I'm quite sure that you have some of you might have some experience that's different or interesting to share with the floor, or maybe you have very interesting questions, right? Most of the time, I learned a lot from the audience, right, of my talk. มีไหมครับคำถาม Are there any questions? Right. Oh, there are quite a lot, right? 188 participants. I'm so happy, right? And you know, I feel very honored today. มีไหมฮะคำถามเชิญนะครับคำถามมีไหมครับ
I've got one question in the comment box right here ค่ะอาจารย์
Oh, very good.
It's from what's pilot test? What's the pilot
the pilot test, right? Okay. When you do research, right? You can. I mean, before you start collecting the data, right? Using the instrument that you have developed or created, right? You need to try it out, right? For example, if you design a test containing 40 items. Let's say, you know, you want to you are let's say you are doing research on present perfect tense. Let's make it simple, right? Present perfect tense, right? And you create pre-test, right? But you know, how can you make sure that the test that you created is of a good quality? Because, you know, if the quality is doubted, this is going to be, you know, the end of the world for you, right? After you analyze the data, because, you know, if your instrument, whatever it is flawed or it has some defects, right? This is going to have negative impact on the findings that you got later on, right? So you need to get pilot study means you try it out with similar group of student or participant. For example, you want to collect the data from your own student. Let's say, you know, you are teaching 40 students, right? And you know, there are another section that there are some other sections that your colleagues are teaching, right? So you maybe ask your colleagues to collect the data, maybe, you know, from 10, 20 students, right? And then you look at them, you look at the findings from the pilot study. Maybe you can see something. For example, maybe some test items are, you know, maybe they have two possible answers. You know, this is what happens all the time, right? Yeah, I mean, when we pilot test the instrument like the test, right? We often see the problems, right? And we should try our best to solve the problem. For example, we can see that, oh, this one, right? It doesn't have the best answer, right? Or this one, it doesn't have the answer. Or maybe, you know, this one is too difficult, right? I mean, all the students in the pilot study, right, got it wrong, right? Maybe you have to come back and revise this, right? So you know, all the research instruments, including interview questions, must be validated or pilot tested, right? So thank you very much for this question.
Thank you ค่ะ I think
okay, let me answer. Okay.
I think Ajahn Eric would like to ask a question.
เชิญครับอาจารย์ Eric เชิญครับ
Yes.
Okay. After อาจารย์ Eric, I come back to the question in the chat. There are quite a lot now. Yeah, very good. Okay. ครับอาจารย์ครับ
Yeah, actually, I did not write my question. I would like to tell to you in.
Yes.
Okay. So, is there a possibility that we can combine conclusion in that of pedagogical implications?
Yes, it is. You can, right? Actually, conclusion and pedagogical can be merged, as I mentioned earlier. But if you want to merge them, make sure that you keep the term conclusion because it's a bigger term, right? Yeah. I mean, all research paper must have the part known as conclusion. And in conclusion, you can include pedagogical implications or even limitations and recommendations, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
ครับ you can even separate them but you need to have conclusion as one big part นะครับ let me read the questions in the chat box นะครับ regarding the literature review how can we know that the literature review is comprehensive, right? Okay, this is a very good question. Many graduate students of mine keep asking me, Ajahn, how do I know when to stop, right? When to stop? Actually, according to Seliger and Shohami 1989, who are very famous writers for research methods in second language learning, something like that, they said literature review is an unending process. So it means you can never stop, right? So I would like to say that you can start collecting your data. Okay, after you have done quite a thorough review, but you don't know whether or not it's adequate, not adequate, right? But okay, maybe you can talk to your colleagues or talk to anyone who are close to you and who are expert in the field, but that's okay, no problems, right? Once you think you have reviewed a lot, right? A lot, okay, you can start doing your research, and sometimes, right, when you see the findings, right, and the findings you got don't seem to get support by the previous study that you have reviewed, maybe it may tells you that your literature review is not sufficient enough, right? This is my own strategy when I did literature review. When you are new in the field, for example, right? When I started doing my research on collocation is my area. My area of research interest นะครับ so when I first doing this 10 years ago, right, I got to know different big names in the field like Firth 1957, right, Lewis, Hills, Nesselhoff, and many other researchers, and you can see that the same group of researchers and scholars would be repeated in the subsequent papers. So I would suggest that you read recent papers first. Recent papers mean those that are published in the last 5 years, right, on the topic that you are interested in. And when you read, right, let's say you read up to 10 papers, you can see that the same authors or the same researchers are cited repeatedly, right? So for example, when you read the paper on collocation and you are interested in the role of L1 transfer, right? The way the learners resort to their mother tongue in using L2 English collocation, and you can see that many people refer back to Nesselhoff 2003, 2005, right? So you know that she must be a big name. So you should go back and read her work, something like that. See, anything that has been cited again and again is, it has its impact, right? So it means, this is a good paper, right? So, the source of paper is also very important, right? If a paper is published in very notorious journals like predatory journals or bill-listed journals, right? That paper would not be cited very often. But if it's published in very good journals or, by well-known publisher like Elsevier, Taylor and Francis, Cambridge University Press, right? It's very likely that it's going to be cited a lot, right? So, the source of the papers, where the publication appear is also significant, right? Now, so I would suggest that if you want to know that the literature review covers almost everything you need, right? Try to read big names papers. How do you know that they are big names in the field? They are cited a lot. They are cited by, let's say, more than 70% of the papers that you have reviewed. And you can start with, the papers published in the last 5 years. นะครับ Okay, so let's move on. นะครับ Professor Mubarak, what would you recommend for those that could not get access to registered database such as Scopus? Usually, right, getting access is very, very important, right? So if you are university lecturers or if you are scholars, right, who are working for organization, you usually, the university subscribe, for leading databases like Scopus, Web of Science, or JSTOR, ERIC. Actually, ERIC is free, right? But ERIC doesn't have everything. It has only abstract, right? And the free of charge papers, right? But if you are university lecturers like Thammasat, okay, Chiang Mai University, Khon University, Chulalongkorn University, Mahidol, right? You should have access to quite a lot. Yeah, but not all, right? Okay. But it doesn't mean that you can access all the papers you need, right? Of course, right? The easiest way is to buy, right? I mean, if you cannot access any paper, but you really need it, you buy, right? But many people they are reluctant to buy, right? Me too, right? Yeah, maybe we think, oh, it's very expensive, right? $15 for just one small paper, right? Sometimes I buy, right? But some other times, maybe this is a tip. You can ask your friends who are studying abroad, right? Or maybe they are studying abroad, but they are in Thailand because of the COVID-19 pandemic, right? But they have their own password to enter into their own university database, right? For example, if they are studying at very good university like Oxford, Yale, Harvard, Cambridge, they should have access to almost everything in the world, right? So they can help you. I can remember when I did my PhD dissertation, I wanted to get a paper on relative cost acquisition, and it's not free of charge, and it was not downloadable. Both in Chulalongkorn University and Thammasat databases. But I asked one of my colleagues, she was doing her PhD, her MPhil in Cambridge, right? And Cambridge is one of the best in the UK. So, within 5 minutes, she downloaded the paper that I wanted and she send it to me. So you can use something like that, but make sure that don't bother them too much, right? I mean, make sure that they are the paper that you really need, something like that. Nakab. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. You would like me to give recommendations on writing different parts of the paper? I think I did, right? I think I did. Okay. Okay, I showed you how these different parts can be written, right? Actually, it depends on the fields of study, right? They have their own traditions, right? But those who are ELT scholars and those who are applied linguistic scholars, like this course analyst, would write a paper in different ways, right? Okay. Some of you say second language. For a language instruction, what research should be considered quantitative or qualitative? I would say both. It depends, right? It depends what is the area of your specialization. If you are purely quantitative researcher, you can make it purely quantitative or qualitative, right? It's okay. But right now, the current trend is to make it mixed, right? For example, if you use questionnaire or test scores, this quantitative, right? But you can supplement it using interview data. It's going to be qualitative as well, right? But the proportion would be different. If you use one questionnaire, one test, right, and one interview, yeah, maybe the proportion, the weight would be more on quantitative side. That's okay, right? You can be more on quantitative or qualitative. It depends, right? But make sure that if you want to do it purely qualitative, right, you have to make sure, because I have seen some authors submitting manuscript to Learn Journal got rejected because they claim that their papers are purely qualitative, not using any statistics. But when we send it out to peer reviewers who are qualitative experts, they say the context is not elaborated, something like that. I mean qualitative people have their own way. I'm not, right? I'm not. But qualitative people, those who are case study researchers, those who are very keen on ethnography or whatever, right? They have their own convention of dealing with data, of describing the context of the study. So, if your paper is not adequate, chances are it can get rejected, right? Okay. Oh, okay. Some of you asked about how to mention abbreviation and acronym. So this is very easy, right? If there are many acronyms or many abbreviations that you are going to use in your paper, for example, remember CLIL, right? Content language related something, right? So, whenever an acronym appears for the first time in your paper, right? You have to spell it out, right? The full name, the full form, right? And then put the abbreviation or acronym in brackets, right? Or you can even put hereafter, for example, a lexical bundle, right? And from now on, you want to refer it using LB. You can say lexical bundles and then in parentheses, hereafter LB. So it means after this, right? From now on, I'm going to use the term the acronym LB, right? So that's very common, right? Because it's quite awkward to repeat the same term again and again, right? So if possible, please use the acronym, right? But make sure that the acronym is spelled out what it is, right, from the beginning. Because when the readers read, maybe they got confused or maybe they got lost, and they say, oh, what is SLA? Yeah, when they go back, oh, SLA stands for second language acquisition, something like that, right? Okay. I'm very happy, right? So you have so many questions to ask me. Yeah, very good. Specific tips for writing title. Okay, so, okay, actually I have no tips, right? But I would suggest that you write the title as the final thing, right? This is my tip, right? You might have your own different opinions, right? But this is my own. I have been writing quite a number of papers, and every time I try to come up with the research the paper title first, and you have to come back and revise it for several times. So right now, I write the last thing, right? Even introduction, you can write introduction as the final part. You can write literature review first, methodology, your findings and everything, and you can come back and write introduction as the final part, right? Because actually, introduction and conclusion are very similar. They just give an overview of what the research paper is concerned with. Right. So this is what I learned from Professor Dr. Amara Prasit. She is my teacher, right? And she taught me research writing a long time ago. She said, usually when you write research papers, right, it is useful to write introduction later, right? You don't have to write introduction. Even if you try to do so, you would come back and make, a number of revisions anyway. Right. So, make sure that you write everything, all the other parts, right? And you are happy and satisfied with them, right? And then you can come back and write introduction. It will be easier, right? It will be easier, right? And, that there is no tip. But if you ask me, usually when we write research title, the title of the paper, number one, don't make it too long, right? Yeah, don't make it too long, right? Because the readers would be confused if it's too long, and it should not hold the same title as the title from your dissertation or from the research report, right? So this is a tip, right? For example, you got a scholarship and you write a research report, or maybe it's a doctoral dissertation. The title of your doctoral dissertation or the research report that you get support from the your faculty, right? The title can be as long as you prefer, right? But you can make it brief, succinct, and catchy when you present it in the paper, right? Maybe try to make it catchy means make it interesting, right? Make it interesting, right? Yeah, try to attract call for attention from the readers, right? But again, the readers should know from the title what the topic of your paper is, right? Maybe some of the writers want to make it too catchy, right? But when you read, you don't know what the main content is about. So that's not appropriate, right? So for example, my advisor, my Ajahn Dr. Nirada, sorry to mention her name, but she was working at the Faculty of Arts at Chulalongkorn, and right now, and she was doing something about passive voice, right? About the use of an accusative. I'm not so sure about the syntactic term, but some people, especially students, often use happen in passive voice, although it is not allowed, right? Because the verb like happen, occur, appear, they are intransitive verb, so they cannot be used in passive constructions, right? But many students often say something was happened rather than something happened, right? So she coined or she created the paper that she published in Phasa journal. What's happening to what was happened, right? So it's like, it sounds, it's rhythmic and it's very meaningful. What's happening to what was happened? So you may use some gimmick like this when you create the title of your paper, right? Don't use it something that is very boring, like a study of, right? No, you can keep it in your dissertation or in the research report, but in the paper that you want to get published, avoid using something like study of, investigation into, right? Because it's like not important, right? Yeah, people know that it's investigation, right? People know that it's a study. Okay. Now, are there any other questions? How to present text examples when doing text analysis? Usually, you have to conform to the norms, right? When you present any kind of examples, for example, okay, here you ask me about text analysis. Let's say this cost analysis or move analysis, right? There are many examples that you can present, but you cannot present them all. Choose only examples that are the most effective. Choose examples that are the most interesting and support what you are claiming, or support support you, right? Actually, when you have a pile of data, let's say, when you do text analysis, right? There are many examples that you want to present to the readers, right? Due to the space limit, you cannot present them all. You have to be selective, right? You have to be selective. Choose the one that are the clearest, the most interesting, right? And that's okay, right? That's okay. I would suggest that go back to the papers that you reviewed for your literature, right? And look at the way they present their work, right? Yeah, you can see. For example, if you did something like you analyze errors in student essay, this is quite dated topic, right? But it's a good example. When you show the errors, right? You don't have to present all the errors examples, right? You don't have enough space. But what you are supposed to do is to present only the serious errors, or the errors that would make readers understand, right? What the type of error is, right? If the errors are not so clear, or you want to focus on errors on the use of adjective, but the example is not very clear whether it's error on adjective or noun, maybe you can avoid exemplifying that. Avoid using that as your example. Just only include the clear examples, effective examples in your paper, right? So you must be selective,นะครับ. Okay. Oh, a lot of questions, right? Zoom recording. I'm not so sure whether it's being recorded today, but I would rather not give my slides to the audience, nakap. So it's copyrighted because it can be plagiarized, right? I got 2 cases of plagiarism. I mean, some people took my slides for their own use, right? How would we balance between using hedging and being confident? So this is very good question, right? Yeah. On the one hand, we should use hedging, right? But on the other, we could use something called booster. Booster is in contrast to hedge, right? Hedge means the use of something to soften the claim, as we discussed earlier, like the use of model may, probably, right? But sometimes, right? I would say that when you can be confident, right? You can be confident when you write conclusion or when you write pedagogical implication. For example, if you are quite sure that readers of your paper will benefit a lot for, especially for their language education, for their teaching, right? You can use will, you can use definitely, right, booster, but make sure that the number of boosters that you are using must be lower than that of hedges, right? Actually, as an academic writer, hedges or hedging is expected more. But sometimes if you want to show confidence, it's good, right? It's good. If you read papers written by big names, big names don't care. They often avoid using hedging. I'm quite sure that when they are not big names, when they were novice writers, they use hedges a lot, right? But now they are big names and they got published. They knew that they would get published for sure, right? So they try to show their own confidence, right, by using a lot more boosters, like definitely, will, absolutely, right? But to play safe, try to reduce the number of boosters in your paper and increase the number of hedges, especially if you are new in the field, right? When you write some part like, thank you, Nakab, right, research methodology, right? You can see that, what you learn from your teachers or what you learn from the textbook, right? By Swales and Feek, that is one of the most well-known academic writing textbook called Academic Writing for Graduate Students, right? By Christine Feek and John Swales, who is the father of move analysis, right? So they would say that when you write your methodology part or when you report, especially methodology part, you are supposed to use passive voice, passive constructions. Right. Yeah. The data was collected. The statistic chi-square was applied, something like that. Right. But right now, the trend is changing. Right. But you should not follow the trend now because, you can see that in some papers published in even good high impact journals, right? The writers or the group of writers tend to use we, I. Yeah, for example, we think that we collected the data, we analyzed the data, something like that, right? But because they are big names, right? They are big names. They can do that, right? And I think this is like Western culture, right? But to play safe, I have never seen, any writers submitting the papers to our Learn journal or any other journals that I know using I or we, yeah, especially in methodology, right? So to play safe, right, avoid using first person pronoun, right?นะครับ. How can I overcome plagiarism? How can I paraphrase the previous published study? Okay, I think you should practice your paraphrasing skill, right? There are a lot right now. There are a lot of websites and there are a lot of books in academic writing that can help you practice your paraphrasing skill. Or maybe I'm quite sure that there are many workshops, many free workshops, or maybe online courses, free online courses that teach us how to paraphrase. Because two skills that are needed for academic researchers are paraphrasing skill and summarizing skills, right? You need to possess both to be a successful writer, right? So, you asked me whether or not there is software for paraphrasing. I think there is, right? Some of my colleagues show me some free software that student can use for paraphrasing and it's quite accurate, right? But sometimes it's not accurate, right? And maybe if they paraphrase it incorrectly, right, even though the grammar is perfect, the content of the original text might be affected, right? So you might be sued by the original creators of the text, right? So I still not trust the quality of paraphrasing software, even though it's good, right? Maybe it's not good enough. I would say that rely on yourself, rely on your paraphrasing skill, but this must be honed. This must be, you need to practice, right? Yeah, it cannot be obtained or acquired overnight. Okay. Many people are confused between what to include in introduction, what to include in literature review. And actually, in research papers, today we are talking about research papers, right? As I said, it depends on the policy of the individual journal, right? I would say that for some journals, you can put them together. In some journals, there would not be a part known as introduction. It will be something like the first part, right? And then you write down and you try to link rationale to literature. So they are merged together. But in many other journals, introduction is still needed, right? You need to have like 1 or 2 paragraphs of introduction, and you move on to literature review. So I would say that in introduction, you are presenting the general overview of what your study is about, right? But in literature review, you address the main concepts, the main theories that are related to your study, right? นะครับ Case study. I don't have enough time to talk about case study. Maybe, the case study is a kind of qualitative study. Usually, you did it with only one single student if you want to observe how to knowledge development, something like that. If you are interested, I would suggest that you read Patsy Duff, right? Patricia Duff book, right? The first version was published in 2008, right? Professor Patricia Duff is from University of British Columbia in Canada, and she once gave a talk in Jula, right, at Chulalongkorn University, and her talk was awesome, right? She was a very nice and friendly professor, and her book is called Case Study in Applied Linguistics. It's one of the best books in our field, right? I think maybe she has issued her second or third edition. I'm not so sure. Maybe you can check it, yeah, from Amazon. Okay. Okay, I have seen another good question, right? Should we have to put the information of participants, tools, analysis, analytical method, right, in the synthesis of the previous study? Yes, it is, right? So after you have reviewed all the theories, right, all the concepts of your that you apply in your study, right? You should also review previous related empirical studies. Empirical studies mean studies done in the past, right? Yes, and if time, if space permits, right? You should also review this, right? You don't have to mention all of them. Mention only the studies that are closely related to your analysis, or just mention the one that you are going to refer to in discussion. So here you can also mention, you should mention briefly who the participants are, right? What the tools are, how they analyze the data, but do it briefly, right? Okay. Now, believe me, right? When you write, many people tend to write more than expected, right? Yeah. Sometimes you say, "Oh, how can I write a paper?" Right? But actually, when you write, you never stop. You never know when to stop. นะครับ Okay. Should we take a break now? ครับ อาจารย์จิรายุ can we take a break now?
Yes, we can take a break. For how long would you like to take
10 minutes ไหมครับนะ 10 minutes.
Okay,
So let's meet again 11:10 นะครับ. So I'm going to cover the second part นะครับ. So I try to get it done by 12 นะครับ. And then so you have time for questions, right? So you can type the questions or you ต่อนะครับ Okay, can I continue? นะครับ we are going to move on to another session, and I think I'm quite sure that we are going to have some time later, and they are open to all the questions and comments, right? ครับ okay ครับ okay. Right. Some many questions that you are asking, for example, predatory journals, how to get published, how to avoid rejection, right? So I'm going to, right. I'm going to cover this in, the second session here, right? So I'm going to share the screen. So can you see the screen, right? Okay. I like to go a bit quickly here, right? Writing manuscript for international publication. So now I have talked about this morning. We looked at the components and examples of how to write good papers to be submitted to journals, right? Yeah, our aim today is international publication, especially Scopus, right? And I'm quite sure that most of you here are in our fields of English language teaching and applied linguistics, right? So I'm going to talk about these, right? First of all, why do we have to publish, right? According to Professor I.C. Lee, we publish because this is related to our academic community and research community. We want to share our research result. We want to benefit education. But what seems to be closely related to our job is we want to maintain our job. We want to make sure that we have job security. Some of you might want to get research funding. Some of you may want career advancement, promotion to assistant professor, associate professor, and full professor, right? Okay, today I'm not talking about Thai Journal Citation Index, but this is just for your information. If you select to publish in Thai journals, Thai journal here means not the language, right? You can publish using English. You can write your papers and get published in English, right? But the database is in Thailand only, right? It's accepted in Thailand. So there are 3 tiers, right? According to Thai Journal Citation Index or TCI, tier 1 is the best, right? Followed by tier 2, right? And tier 3 is something that maybe not very good quality, or maybe they are new, right? They are new and they are improving their quality to get accepted in higher tiers, right? So these are the titles of the humanities and social sciences journals, right? They accept, I think they welcome papers in the fields of humanities and social sciences, and all of these are tier 1, including many that just got re-indexed in tier 1, right? At the end of June. Right, so there are มนุษยศาสตร์วิชาการ or Journal of Humanities published by เกษตรศาสตร์ University. You can submit your manuscript to Rangsit Journal of Social Sciences and Humanities by Rangsit University. Journal of Multidisciplinary in Social Sciences, right? I'm not sure when, maybe this one is Rajapat Sondusit นะครับ I'm not so sure. Don't take my word for it. You can search for this. วลัยลักษณ์ okay, of course, this is by มหาลัยวลัยลักษณ์ University. And the last one, this one, is also indexed in tier 1 of TCI วารสารมนุษยศาสตร์ and สังคมศาสตร์ อุบลราชธานี University, right? And if we want to focus, I mean scope down to our fields in language and linguistics, right? The journals that are in tier 1 are ภาษา Learn, Reflections, and please note that these 3 journals are also included in Scopus as well. At Thammasat University, the Faculty of Liberal Arts also has another good journal called JSO, Journal of Studies in the English Language. It was formerly known as JES, Journal of English Studies, and then the title has been changed. And Thammasat also has another journal publishing both Thai and English articles in language and linguistics, right? Okay. There are also some good journals in tier 2, right? For example, ภาษาปริทัศน์ Journal, Thoughts, Thai TESOL Journal, Okay. There is another journal that is very good and I love it. It's NIDA, Journal of Language and Communication, published by NIDA, right? And it used to be in tier 2 and now it has been re-indexed in tier 1. So it's another good journal, right? Now, many people keep asking me what Scopus is, how important it is. So Scopus is a database, right, by Elsevier. And Scopus claims to include contents from 24,600 active titles. And, they have about 5,000 publishers rigorously vetted and selected by the review board of Scopus. And, this is advertised or promoted in Scopus website. It claims to cover interdisciplinary scientific data literature across all research fields. Okay, why Scopus is good? Because, Scopus has its own criteria to include any journals, right? So, to get published in Scopus journal is difficult, but to get a journal index in Scopus is, far more difficult, right? Because, the journal must conform to, a number of criteria, right? For example, they must be published regularly, right? Peer review content is required. And, they must publish in English or, in any language that is readable